Would you say it gave you the feeling you get when you fall in love? Not with a girl or a boy, but with the heavens above.
Yeah, Lovesexy. Say yes. Hi, welcome to the PPUK Podcast, and this slightly different one this month, just because things are a little different all over the world. We're having a bit of a group chat, and we're inviting some more people on, because why not? This week, we're going to do Lovesexy, I think is a good one.
As it's the anniversary today.
Oh, is it? Lovesexy! Yes. So, in attendance we have, as usual, myself, Chopin, one of the regular on this podcast, and also one of the London meetup. We also have with us regularly Lee.
Hi, I'm back again, and I'm not going to be in my element with an 80s album, so I'm going to be messing up a lot.
Exactly, and since me and Lee are kind of famously 90s guys, we've invited a couple of the big 80s fans, and I have to say, and we have Freedom here.
Hello, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and just give yourself an introduction of how you fit in with the whole Prince scene. And
Oh, God, it's a long story. Where do I start? Freedom, also known as the Dawn Experience. I got into Prince at my 1999, video 1999 album. It's way back in 1982, and everything followed from there, really. That's what I'm going to tell you right now, because I'll probably go on for days. So,
okay.
Yeah.
There'll be a whole podcast in itself.
Exactly.
The Freedom Experience.
I think we could do a whole podcast on your involvement in the scene, and also somebody who's been very instrumental in converting me and making me appreciate a little bit more some of the 80s albums is Andy. And can you tell us about your history with Prince and the scene?
Sure. I'm 46 years old, and I've been listening to Prince religiously since I was 13. So that's 33 good years of funky music. I'm definitely all about the 80s, but there is a reciprocal arrangement with me and Chopin where he does get me into the 90s and beyond and make me respect that some of those albums a bit more than I tend to do immediately. But I'm wedded to the 80s, so I'm really happy to be talking about Lovesexy today, because it's a massively, massively instrumental album for me.
I think this is one of the, just as in general, this is one of the 80s albums that you didn't need to kind of, I've always kind of loved the whole journey, but this is one of the 80s albums that I have to say, on its own merits, floored me on first listen. It was so different than everything I was listening to with Diamonds and Pearls and Symbol, and it was just before the hits came out. Somebody gave me a cassette copy of Lovesexy, and I've never heard music like this.
That's really funny, because although I'm all about the 80s, when Lovesexy first came out, I could not make head or tail of it, and it was the first Prince album that I waited for, because I got into him with Sign of the Times. I saw the Sign of the Times single video on Top of the Pops, and I would record everything on Top of the Pops. And halfway through the song, if I decided I didn't like it, I'd stop the VHS and rewind for the next track. And if I liked it, I'd carry on recording. And with Sign of the Times, just those words on the screen and that music, this one's a keeper. And then I played that song about 45 times on the bounce, you know? So Sign of the Times is where I got into Prince, but Lovesexy was the first album I was waiting for, having devoured the actual album Sign of the Times by that. And then I got it, and Alphabet Street is a no-brainer. It's instant and magnificent, and you can't do anything but surrender. But that's my opening gambit, is that I thought Lovesexy was just Alphabet Street, anesthesia, and a whole lot of noise I couldn't understand, and it took me a while.
I'm glad you said that. You make me feel better now as a 90s fan, because I was exactly the same, going back and doing the homework. So I'm glad you said that.
But yeah, I'd like to hear how everyone else got into it too.
Well, I had to go back and listen to it as my Prince homework, because obviously I got into Prince Batman album and then Diamonds and Pearls and kind of skipped Graffiti Bridge. So I kind of knew all the singles, but I had to go back and listen to the album and do my homework. And the thing is, I listen to it and I just hear other later Prince tracks in it. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure the album out, I think, still.
Oh wow, it's weird when you've got into an artist and then you think you know who they are, but you've got to go back and look at their back catalogue and you go, they came from here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly that.
What about you, Freedom? What did you think of Lovesexy on first go?
Well, like you, when I bought 1999 album, I didn't get it at first, so it took me a while to really get into it. It wasn't until Purple Rain came out that I went back to the 1999 album and I understood it. But the 80s, for me, each album that Prince brought out was different. You know, he went on to a different style. 1999 was completely different to Purple Rain, which was completely different to Around the Road in the Day, which was completely different to Under the Cherry Moon, which was completely different to Lovesexy. But after Lovesexy, he started following trends, I think, with Batman. Look at Chopin. I can see your face.
I love the fact we've got the video on this. We can see his response.
He started to, instead of being inventive and being different, he started to follow trends. He started to go into rap and et cetera, et cetera. So Lovesexy, that was a trip. It wasn't a music to me. It was just a complete trip. And I loved the way it was all like one track. That you couldn't skip track when you listen to it on the CD.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've kind of found out recently, because people were talking. I put a post up about the album anniversary today, and people were complaining that on Spotify it's not split into tracks; it's the whole thing on its own, which is like how the CD was, which I didn't know until recently.
I loved that. I loved that, but it made it still. You know, I knew that. I knew there was something going on with this record and I wasn't going to just give up on it. But for me, it was a case of finding moments to enjoy in it and linking them together. And I had nothing out of I Know and Glam Slam. And like I said, the only other song that started to register with me was Anesthesia, because it was just spine chilling and straight to the emotion.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I mean, that one I played. But to me, it was like a case of piecing together little stepping stones from the whole album. And eventually, well, I say eventually, it must have been about a week and a half later, you know. I was obsessed. This was the album, once it went into me, this was the album that turned me from a really big Prince fan into somebody who wouldn't shut up about it for the next 33 years and counting.
And still going.
Yeah.
I think I got a similar thing as well. It's like, because I was, like I said, I loved Diamonds and Pearls and I loved Symbol, and I was like, this guy's amazing. And I was already pretty much on the road to being like a fan, like a real, he was suddenly becoming almost as big as Madonna was, like pre-listening to him in my life. And that was quite, as everyone knows that knows me, is quite high up there. But when I heard Lovesexy, it was just like, because before it was just, there was grooves, it was nasty, it was, and even with Symbol, there was real emotional points towards the end with Sacrifice of Victor and stuff. But when I heard Lovesexy, it just spoke to a very, very different part of me that was just, I think, so deep that it was just locked in, that Superfan was, like kind of obsessive, but was kind of linked to it.
Would you say it gave you the feeling you get when you fall in love? Not with a girl or a boy, but with the heavens above.
Yeah, Lovesexy. Say yes.
I think it's funny because it was the one where a lot of people, whether they liked or loved Prince already, I guess it was probably a watershed for a lot of folks. It was like, how far are you going to follow him? Because if you got Lovesexy, you got him, the only word is you got Prince religiously. Really.
But correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't as popular as Sign of the Times, was it? I think the Billboard charts,
especially in America, it wasn't popular.
I think it was as big in Europe. But not in America.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
That's part of that is because they couldn't. Walmart were threatening not to show the cover, so it wasn't out on display in the same way. I don't know if that's actually
that was part of it. Yeah.
But Sign of the Times will always be, and I think correctly, the album that gets the most. It's the golden boy of them all. And you can put up others against it. You can put 1999 up against it in a way. But Sign of the Times was a hit with the critics, even if it didn't sell like Prince had once sold. But Lovesexy was another split again. Lovesexy was, a lot of critics really loved it, but it was it was another deeper way into Prince that was more rarefied again.
I think weirdly enough, I actually think it's a deeper, more personal statement than Sign of the Times, and more sonically adventurous as well. But that's not to kind of demote Sign of the Times. It's a classic. I mean, like, every time we talk about, like, kind of favourites and stuff like that, I mean, even Prince's worst output is still kind of worthy of note. So, but Lovesexy, I find a much deeper personal. I don't know if it's just
more personal.
Yeah, it's much more personal as a statement, and also sonically a bit more adventurous.
I sort of would split hairs a bit, really. I mean, Sign of the Times is more encyclopedic, and Lovesexy is more of a kind of it's more kind of pointed in one direction, and it's a very unusual direction. Nothing sounds like Lovesexy, and that's great. I mean,
actually, that's an interesting point. Have you ever heard another album by another artist that sounds like Lovesexy?
Absolutely not.
No. Only Prince could do that album, I think. Nobody else, no other artist can do it.
It's a unique filter of influences that ends up in that place.
But it's also, I was thinking about this prior to this discussion today, it's the first post-revolution album that doesn't have any revolution influence in it, and I don't just mean the personnel on the album, but like Sign of the Times, it still had a lot of kind of arrangement ideas that were sort of had grown out of the revolution days, even if it didn't have the revolution on it for the majority of the album.
Yeah, there's some of the stuff that just has the revolution on it, like live backing.
But even when it doesn't, you can sort of hear that it's getting away from the revolution, but you can see where it came from. And then Lovesexy seems to be a further abstraction into Prince's world, or into Prince's head, and that's why it's so personal, I think.
Doing my homework as a 90s fan, it was like I could hear, as I said before, I could hear other tracks. So when I was listening to Dance On, I felt like I was listening to Loose. Does that make sense? Yeah.
16th note, like
yeah.
It's a 16th note kind of.
But
driving.
See, to me, as not as big a fan of that era, Loose is good. I like Loose, but Loose sounds like Prince trying to do rave, whereas Dance On sounds like Prince forging his own path into. Nothing sounds like Dance On, but Loose sounds like other things to me. That's the difference. But also, he definitely reused the melody of I Know a few times in his career. I Know is basically the melody of the Return of the Bump Squad.
Oh, now I'm going to have to go back and listen.
Which part, like the chorus bit?
If you think about the verse, I know there is a heaven. I know. It's so close to Return of the Bump Squad.
I don't hear it.
Thank you, Andy. And I've got more Prince homework to do now.
There's always more Prince homework.
There's always more Prince homework. That should be a T-shirt. There should always be more Prince homework. There's a new T-shirt design.
It's more phrasing than key, right? That you're talking about. It's kind of phrasing like da 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 da.
Yeah, it's a kind of template for feel and phrasing.
Yeah, it's kind of bouncy on solid background. Okay,
and I'm sure there's other melodies he's sort of Cindy C is kind of like a straighter version of that melody too, or a less swung version of I Know. And X's Face and Cindy C are really close. And I think they all grow out of of course, I Know grew out of The Ball as well, which is that's the original melody.
Which was a potential for Sign of the Times or Crystal Ball at the time.
Fantastic song.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing sometimes where the way he reuses ideas and then they just come back in. I mean, like things like Lovesexy spawned something like Raven to the Joy Fantastic, which doesn't even come back for another 10 years.
Yeah. And
well, wasn't that going to be the follow-up album after Lovesexy instead of Batman?
Yeah. Yeah. So Raven to the Joy Fantastic was meant to be was kind of like, because he was recording stuff like Elephants and Flowers on tour, and then it kind of just I love that Prince can get so many different effects out of one idea sometimes. Like, the drum beat for Housequake is kind of shared with Super Funky Califragisexy, is kind of shared with, is it shared with Super Funky? Housequake is basically shared with Bob George, Psychedelica, and at least one other song that I'm forgetting now, like that. One version of that or another is used to make all these different feels, and I feel like I Know is a melody or a kind of phrasing he returns to quite a bit afterwards. Well, I mean,
do a Prince Tree song where you do a song and how it trees off in. Link it to other songs. There you go. Some more Prince homework.
If you include the outtakes, it's kind of amazing the way that songs kind of grows. Like you have something like 9 to 5 People, which is a outtake from about 87, 88 that then becomes Dance with Power, which is a Batman outtake, and then finally becomes Dance with Power, which kind of elements of that become Bat Dance. So it's interesting how it sometimes takes 2 or 3 versions of a song for it to actually get out there.
Am I pulling you off of Lovesexy a bit too much?
We're going off course here. Bring it back.
Yeah, it's true. Anyway. But Lovesexy is an interesting branch that leads into very like you say, Lee, is like you can hear its influence.
Yeah, especially me going back, I was like I could hear other songs from that, if that made sense.
As an album in its totality, it also always, to me, obviously it's got a dark twin in the shape of the Black Album, which is amazing that they're connected by When Two Are in Love, which is the common track. So that's like a double helix around that song. So that's interesting. But I also have always seen like Lovesexy as a kind of electronica abstraction of Around the World in a Day, the album, because they're both 9 tracks albums. They're both really religious. Actually, I mean, Lovesexy more than Around the World. But Around the World's got lots of religion in it.
The ladder, yeah.
And they to me, they seem like obviously Around the World is a band effort and it's much more organic. And by Prince's standards, it's a real organic album. Whereas Lovesexy is the move away from that. But it seems like a kind of translation of Around the World into this new kind of electronic abstraction.
They're both reactions to the previous album as well.
Uh-huh.
Around the World in a Day is a reaction of going completely upset from Purple Rain, whereas Lovesexy is a reaction to going into too far into one direction with the Black Album. So it seems like these sparks of inspirations are about hitting a dead end and going and reacting to going down.
Almost doing the reverse of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like rebirths, aren't they? And I mean, definitely with Lovesexy, you just have to look at the. I know we're going to talk about the concerts in a bit, but you look at him on tour, and he looked like a man reborn. He had such passion in those performances, and he looked like a manic not street preacher, but a manic preacher.
It's interesting with the tour that you mentioned, the tour and the way he performs the tour, because I actually had the tour video before I heard the album. So kind of maybe that's why the album didn't sound so strange to me, is that I knew like Alphabet Street, obviously I knew my brother had the 7-inch of Alphabet and the Street, and I'd listened to that quite a few times. And quite a few of the songs, I heard the live arrangements first before I heard the album.
Did one of the things I found out about Lovesexy recently, you might know this, and I didn't know it until a non-Prince fan hit me to this a year or so back, was that, you know, the opening segment with all that beautiful ambient music swirling in the background, that then, you know, then Ingrid Chavez comes in and Prince testifies the reason my voice is so clear. You know, that whole piece of music is one big sample taken off a sound effects album.
Didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Isn't that amazing? And it's I was just looking it up before I came here today. It's called
Delia Derbyshire.
Sorry?
Was it that Delia Derbyshire?
No, it's an album called it's an album called Out of This World by Roger Lim, and I think it was like it's from 1976. The track that Prince uses for all that ambient texture is called Passing Clouds.
Oh.
And it's just he just straight plays it for like a minute and a half. And the amazing thing to me is when I found that out, like about 32 years after I listened to Lovesexy, it didn't diminish it at all. It just made it even more amazing to me, that because it's from like a BBC Audiophonics workshop album.
Is that the kind of bit where we're singing, where like the flowers are coming up and a light shines and
on the actual album? On the actual album.
Oh,
yeah,
like the start when like rain is wet, sugar is sweet.
The entire like first minute and a half is bedded on just a playthrough of this BBC Audiophonics workshop sound effects or soundscapes album. And to me it's just amazing that Prince was like, he was always going deeper than you know. Even you know, you don't think of Prince as sampling stuff much around that time, but he was.
Yeah, and it's quite a deep kind of like, it's, I mean, I don't know. I don't know many kind of like American musicians that kind of really hip to the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, but British people kind of tend to, it's heard as a reference because you hear it so much because you watch the BBC. That's
exactly what knocked me out about it, just how eclectic it is. That Prince, to think of Prince rifling through those, you know, he must have had stacks of old wax. And
I was just about to, how did he find that?
Because he was a sponge as well as everything else.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why one of the keys to why it did so well in Europe versus America as well.
True.
I just think it was. Yeah, I don't know why. I think it was just the way Prince's fan base was going. He'd taken it. He'd given America a straight down the line, irresistible rock.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Irresistible rock heroics with Purple Rain, and then he immediately just went left field and isolated America rock and roll radio for the most part, and we just embraced it more in Europe, didn't we?
I guess. So, Freedom, having been used to the twists and turns of like each new album is like really new, Silent Times being different to Break. When you first heard Lovesexy, like what did you think of this particular turn? Was this just more of the greatness, or was it odd?
Oh, by that time I was used to it. Really, I was used to each album being different. So for me, I was used to it, and I liked it. I didn't dislike it. I liked it. I like the way each album is completely different from the last album, and that really sort of like what turns me on about Prince.
Yeah,
back then, but yeah. In the 90s, it wasn't so much. In the 90s, I mean, all albums started to sound a bit not as adventurous.
But did you find it? I mean, I like, although I found it difficult at first, I liked that it was difficult because it was demanding, and I like stuff that takes time to open up sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Like with lots of subsequent prints, I was like, yeah, I know what this is. I know this, and there's been lots of post-80s prints, and yes, I do like lots of post-80s prints, but there's been lots of it where I'm like, I get this immediately, and I know it's not going to get more complex on the second taste or the 50th taste.
Yeah,
and I have been proved wrong. I have been proved wrong, but with something like Lovesexy, I just knew it just became more and more interesting for me.
Lovesexy, it's more. I will agree with you on that. But Lovesexy, it's more obviously there's more to hear than you think, and I think then especially things like a Symbol, which I think just feels like a groovy cacophony that. It just so happened that I was really in for it. I was really here for a groovy cacophony of sounds when I first heard it. But Lovesexy is one of those things where, especially things like Positivity, you've got like different things going off in different keys, and the lyrics are a lot more cryptic in some parts than, say, something like Damn You or Sweet Baby, which is quite clear what it's saying. Lovesexy is much more cryptic. Glam Slam is much more cryptic.
The thing, Lovesexy felt like a whole Rubik's Cube to keep solving. And part of that...
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, yeah.
It's all connected.
Good description.
Every part is connected to every other part. And the fact that it was one endless track, because I had it on CD, made it all the more so.
But that's one thing about Prince, is that he always respected the concept of an album, that it's not just tracks that you skip. You have to listen to the whole experience. He always respected the concept of an album.
But there are other albums that to me sound, post-80s, they sound like a group of songs. I'm not saying he wasn't thinking about sequencing, because he clearly was, but there are albums that sound like a nice bunch of songs to me, but like Sign of the Times is an incredible patchwork, but it's a bunch. That Sign of the Times is an amazing bunch of songs, amazingly sequenced, and we know that it came out of other projects. But the material is so strong that everything sort of hangs together, or one song comments on another, or then he does a U-turn on you, and it feels like a coherent thing. But Lovesexy is Lovesexy is a statement of intent from start to finish, really.
I would put it this way: Sign of the Times, you could mix the songs up and create a different different tracking order, and it would still work as a good album. Because when you listen to Crystal Ball, which is some of the same songs in a different album, it would still sound like a good album. Whereas if Lovesexy just can, in my head, can only exist in that way. Order. In that order. They move, like, because when I was first, like I said, I was listening to it on cassette, and to me it was like Anesthesia wasn't a great song, it was a great high in the musical movement. Like you love that part of the classical movement. Definitely. It's like, and it's so weird that even though I'd heard it as a standalone song in this album, it sounded kind of different in that it just, the way that those orchestral synth parts at the end of Glam Slam going like, and that piano dun, 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 comes out of it. It's just like, I can't imagine that coming after I Wish You Heaven or Positivity. It's just like, from start to finish, it's got a great opener to the album. It's got an epic closer. I think possibly my second favorite closer to a Prince album.
What's your favorite closer?
The harmony parts in Symbol, the Sacrifice of Victor, I think is the best, but Lovesexy is a very close second and dependent on the day.
Before this chat, I was just looking at the different configurations as research, and it doesn't change that much from the 21st of January 1988 till February 1988. Hardly changes. The line was on it in 21st of January.
That's pretty unusual for Prince, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly going back to your points about how you can't change the order of it.
And they're almost in the order that I think there's one or two songs that aren't in there, but they're there in the order that they were recorded. Almost all of them.
Yeah,
like it's
incredible. I think that's incredible to do an album in 2 months like that. That quality is just amazing.
It's totally amazing. I mean, now I've got goosebumps. I can't talk for goosebumps.
That's a man possessed. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a man possessed by an idea.
Yeah,
but only him could do that.
I always think there's something again on the album Lovesexy, which I think it felt like it was a boiling down of all of those big flamboyant organic sounds that had come before, that the Revolution took to their natural conclusion, and it was like a stripping down to a point where you would get songs that are songs that were kind of just linear grooves, like canvases, long thin canvases that Prince would just riff on. So like Alphabet Street starts off as this perfect 3.5 minute pop song, but then on the album you get the extended version where it's just like the rest of it is just like keep rolling the tape and just doodle on it. And then Lovesexy does a similar thing. And then Positivity is start to finish, just one unspooling canvas. I feel like he went really linear on this album.
Riff, the way he can kind of work off of a small idea and like just a small little groove that he can just develop. I think it's quite clear in things like Get Off and Cream maxi singles. That's, I think, where it's quite clear how amazing he is at doing that.
Well, it's like he would always do that on the 12 inches, but on Lovesexy, he kind of, it's like we don't even need 12 inches for this. The album is full of kind of what might have been 12-inch mixes, really.
Yeah.
Like the album is just going to keep unspooling these long songs that are just going to. Yeah, they're essentially 12-inch mixes: Lovesexy, Alphabet Street, and maybe Positivity. But they just work as album tracks in this vision.
Yeah, and Glam Slam, the way that they get that outro as well. I mean, just keeping that as part of the tracking. I think.
The whole second. That's right. The whole second half of Glam Slam with basically a string symphony in 2 minutes is fantastic.
I remember the first time I heard that dun 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 dun, and it was just like
that was something that was one of the pieces that started falling into place for me. But up until like a lot of the melodies were very obtuse on Lovesexy. On the first few listens, it was like, where are the tunes, dude? Where are the tunes? Well, now I know where the tunes are. You just have to tune in.
Is that the reason why there's only like 3 singles from the album? Was it just that he wanted it to be an album experience?
I mean, it's not a singles album, is it? It's just not an album. I don't.
It happened to have a great single.
Yeah, I mean, it was all. Oh god, I mean, yeah, it's got a great single. And I was reading somewhere recently that he considered Glam Slam a mistake as a single, and he tried to pull it about just a few days before it was released as a single, and I can understand that.
Yeah,
I mean, I love Glam Slam, but it's not typical big singles material, really.
What would be the single? Like, say I was, I Wish You Haven't is the third, Alphabet Street is the first. What would you pick for the second?
I might go Dance On, but that's out there. I mean, or I might just say there should have only been 2 singles from it. Maybe it's just not.
I'd probably go for the title track, Lovesexy, as a single.
Well,
it was definitely remixed. So
there's that tantalizing few seconds of what sounds like the most unbelievable remix ever, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. And I think it was on the 10-minute documentary Prince: A Musical Portrait, where you just hear like 5 seconds of this unbelievable Lovesexy remix. And if I could have one track like land in my lap right now, I think I'd like that.
Prince's Day.
We keep dropping hints.
Lovesexy Super Deluxe.
I think an edit of Lovesexy could have been a great single, maybe.
I think it's probably not a good idea on the podcast at the moment.
When You're in Love would be a nice little ballad single.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, as an album, it's not a mainstream album, and it didn't have a lot of mainstream songs on it. Ultimately, I think.
Yeah. Well, the way in which Alphabet Street got a video is not conventional either. Like him just going, "Nah, I'm not going to make a video for it." Then just deciding one night, all right, I'll get a local TV crew like that does like, you know, local news, and we'll get them into Paisley Park and just shoot with kind of green screen and budget video effects. Like, to be quite honest, this Zoom chat probably has better effects than the Alphabet Street video.
I love the Alphabet Street video. I think
I love the hidden message.
Yeah.
Sorry, Freedom?
I love the hidden message.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Don't buy the Black Album.
But also, like, the Alphabet, I mean, are we on to singles now, kind of? The Alphabet Street video is, it's so unashamedly chintzy and kitsch, and it's so unashamedly budget, but it's like, if you wanted to see anyone doing budget, it would be Prince, wouldn't it? Because the music's not budget, the music is top bloody notch.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. He somehow managed to make an incredible video that could so easily, like, it looked kind of like his version of DIY punk.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't like tacky, you know, like it could so easily be really tacky, but it's not.
It's sort of like beyond tacky, really. It's just so good. It's so, I mean, it just didn't, again, it doesn't feel like anything else. It just felt it felt really fresh. Like when the time when everything was really slick. You know, but like so often Prince was like that in the 80s, where it was like everybody else was going one way and Prince was just like, well, I'm accidentally going to pull this masterpiece out, you know, and do it my way. And you go, sure, why not? That's unbelievable.
I remember seeing the video first time and I thought it was early 80s. I didn't think it was later 80s when I first saw it.
Why did he leave the G out of, you know, at the end? We're going for the letters of the alphabet. He left the G out. You know that bit?
Wow. Yeah. There's theories, isn't there, Freedom, you naughty boy?
Wait, yeah, the G...
I have no clue.
Well, isn't it the... it's from, at the time, the kind of Cosmo advice that was really always being put around at the time. I think is part of it being Alphabet Street is innuendo, isn't it? That it's like when you're going down, you do write the alphabet with your tongue.
Cunnilingus.
Cunnilingus. When you're doing cunnilingus, you do the alphabet with your tongue, and G would be this.
Like this,
you know, what would G be in that size? That'd be when she's going A, B, C, D.
There's a couple of stories. One is that Prince was kissing Kat in the studio at that point, and she just got distracted and she forgot the G, which is a typical Prince story. Like, he's so powerful, he can, you know, she can derail.
Make you forget the alphabet.
yeah. I mean, that's got to be some kiss, right? Or there's all. I saw it again. I saw a story online the other day where Prince, I think, had claimed that, well, the song is already in G. It's in the key of G, so you don't need to mention G. That's already in the music, which I love that idea.
I like that idea.
Okay. Yeah.
What did you learn from our podcast today? Well, I learned.
I learned about cunnilingus.
Hey.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first line is I'm going down to Alphabet Street.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, and definitely in like those Dr. Ruth things, is like, well, the way that you do it, and Cosmo, the whole thing, they'd always pretend, well, the secret to doing it is write the alphabet, you know. And
I think there was some comedian who did a routine where he said he would spell out Tennessee when he was going down.
Oh.
It's so funny. Just by chance, I happened to be reading this article before I knew you guys were going to ask me onto this podcast. Just a few days ago, I was reading this article on Lovesexy where I heard a bunch of stuff I haven't heard before. And one of I don't know the truth behind all of these things, but the idea that Prince was paying a nod to this comedy routine about Tennessee being spelt out. I never heard that before.
I'm not going to be able to listen to this song again.
Yeah.
I think a lot of listeners are going to be listening to this song more, Lee. So, you know,
Yeah.
go either way with that, pal.
Yeah, education. It's just the fact I'm on YouTube now. I've got to click not for children now.
Now run and tell your mum about that.
I think people are going to analyse the lyrics a lot more now.
Yeah.
I mean, mileage may vary according on your relationship with your mother. Maybe don't tell her everything about it. But there's another thing about the way the tracks are sequenced and not being in any other order is the segue between I Know and Alphabet Street is so full of
Seamless.
detail.
Oh.
Have you ever looked at a transcription of all the talking in the background for that segue? There's so much information in there. There's so many lines. Like, some would jump out at me like, my name's Audrey Crabtree, I got more holes than a golf course. But somewhere online, I think it's Prince, there used to be a Prince lyrics database where I guess they'd done a lot of close listening and stripping away frequencies to get lyrics. If you can find it online still, it's like he wrote practically a novella in between those two songs. There's so many different overlapping lines of dialogue.
Well, it's interesting because he'd done a similar thing with on the Black Album with Two Nicks United for West Compton.
Absolutely.
You see these pumps?
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, weird enough, this chatter predates that. Even though it's on the Lovesexy album, it was originally on because it was the segue between the Ball and I think Joy and Repetition. Like on the original tracking of Crystal Ball, like, so you'd have the and come on to the Crystal Ball, and then you'd have the Andre Crabtree and and then it goes into the chatter at the start of Joy and Repetition.
There's so much chatter. It's like, to see it transcribed is amazing, because just Prince was brilliant at programming those party scenes and noise. Party scenes and dialogues into tracks. Like, he did it all over the place with Vanity and Apollonia. He did it with The Time. He did it, he was writing comedy skits in much more intricate ways than most. When skits became a thing on hip-hop albums, they tend to be really pulled out of the rest of what's going on. They're standalone things. And Prince would weave them into musical soundscapes.
Which I think Exodus is a prime example of that.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah. That's one thing I always enjoyed about his albums is the skits.
And with the Vanessa Bartholomew's and Symbol, it's...
there's a lot of throwaway stuff in there, but also at the same time, if you're obsessed with Prince, which this is one of the ways he obsesses you, is by putting these details in, and you go, what does that even mean? Like, what does that line mean? My name's Andre Crabtree, I've got more. Who is Andre Crabtree? And you get into these throwaway lines which are there for Prince to hook you in and get you really listening.
I bet, like Jamie Starr and everything, I bet you somewhere in the vault there's a Andre Crabtree album that Prince did, like as a pseudonym.
Well, you're an optimist, Chuck.
I just think he just wrote that much, the likelihood.
It blows me away that he would not only compose this music, play this music, produce this music, but he would then stitch together so much sort of extra detail. You just don't know where the song starts and where the detail ends. And like, again, one of the things that's kept me listening to Prince for decades and decades to come, I'm sure, is I will still hear new things. I will still hear things 25 years into listening to a track that I didn't know were there.
Yeah, same.
Anastasia's a prime example of that. That sounds like a simple song, but it's not. There's there's so many little like brushes and synth kind of counter lines and stuff.
Yeah. On Positivity, it took me a couple of years until I heard Prince buried so deep into the mix, just going, "Say it again." Do you know the bit I'm talking about?
I love that bit.
And it,
Teresa.
You really won't get it unless you listen to it very carefully on headphones, I think. And when you do, you just go, "Whoa!" how did he even have the time to program this much information into one song?
Yeah.
And then he does it again and again and again and again. You just hear a drum that is just tuned differently.
Yeah.
He was pretty good, wasn't he, Prince?
Yeah, so
Always learning.
before the album, did you hear Alphabet Street as a single? Because, like, moving on to the singles, did you have the single, the 12-inch versions or anything before you heard the album? Or were you cold listen to the album not knowing what to expect?
Oh, I had the single.
Yeah, the single came out before the album, didn't it? So we had the single first, yeah. Alphabet Street, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even before you got to the video, like, you were confronted with a whole new font, because back in the day, Prince always had the coolest fonts.
Yeah,
Love fonts.
Yeah.
the whole package of the album was cool.
Yeah. Well, the single package was unbelievable, right? Just this piece
Just a clear C with a sticker on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and it was such a simple idea, but I never saw anyone else do it. I just never saw anyone else do it before Prince did it. You would like just getting something where Prince had just gone, oh, by the way, I'm just going to make a simple change from everybody else's convention, and it's just going to draw you in. You're just going to go, this is a new adventure, and Prince is just like, he's just changed the rules again with this one move of this bizarre sleeve.
And it's the first one, I think, apart from there was one CD promo in Sign of the Times, but this was the first time he had the CD singles. These are the first CD singles as well.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
That Alphabet Street. So were you guys still like just buying the 7 inches, or were you guys like buying the 12 inches when they came out, or CD singles?
I never bought 7 inches. I was with a 12-inch person or a CD person, but I've never bought 7 inches.
I was buying everything I could get my hands on.
Sounds like a typical Prince fan.
So you got the cassette, the CD, the 7-inch, and the 12-inch.
Yeah, because I think if I remember right, I haven't listened to it for a long time, but the 7-inch B-side is a kind of edited slice of the second half of Alphabet Street, isn't it? So like that was a thing in its own right, even though it's not something I'd return to. It was an artifact.
He'd done it. It was kind of like I think it was like homage to those James Brown things where the album track was like 6 minutes or whatever, but the A side and the B side would just be the song cut in half. So part 1, part 2. I think this was like Alphabet Street part 1, Alphabet Street continued. It seemed like an homage to that whole James Brown jams thing.
Yeah, I'd buy that. And it's also got some sort of like kind of crossover with something like, Jamaican dub or something, where the B-side is a kind of continuation or a different aspect of the A-side, right?
Yeah. And there's some kind of fascinating stuff on 7 inches over the time, because like Thieves in the Temple, that they've got that little part 2 jam.
Yeah, you get these weird offcuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the 12-inch had the more interesting artifact on it, did it not, Freedom?
It did, yeah. That's why I bought. That's why I got the 12-inch. It's more interesting than the 7-inch, in my opinion. Yeah, that's right.
So when you heard that 12-inch mix, that this is not music, this is a trip, do you remember first listening?
I was freaking out.
I was freaking out.
I loved it. A lot better than the 7-inch, because it's like half a song. The single is just half a song, whereas the 12-inch is the full song. I think how Prince intended to sort of listeners to hear the full version rather than half a version, in my opinion. So yeah, 12-inch a lot better to me than 7 inches. It's
a great 12-inch, isn't it? I mean, that line, "This is not music, this is a trip," is almost like a manifesto for the whole album to come, really.
Yeah.
Because I kind of think me and Lee having not being kind of having that single beforehand or anticipating it leading into an album in the same way. There's something when I hear that 12-inch for the first time, I've already heard the album, so this is like, this fits totally. This is just an extension. If really I got a like quite. This is extension to the same thing. This is fantastic. And I didn't know if that was like, did it whet your appetite, or was it like, oh, what the hell is this?
No, I couldn't wait for the album to come out. Quite the opposite. It whetted my appetite, and I couldn't wait for the album to come out, and I was first in the queue.
A and B side of that 12-inch were both just like, yes, I cannot get enough of this. And that's why when I got the album and I just was like, whoa, I'm going to have to work for this. That was, it was worth it in the end. You just had to know more about this new direction.
Yeah. I mean, I always loved Prince. Like, I Wish You Heaven, Scarlet Pussy, on the B side.
Yeah, on the B side.
Yeah, that was something else. That was...
Oh man,
the whole I wish, like, because somebody had given me a cassette with like a compilation of Prince stuff, and that was what kind of connected the dots for me. Like that I'd loved all of these songs over the years. I'd loved Alphabet. My brother had a lot of 7-inches and stuff, and Alphabet Street I loved, Bat Dance I loved, Pie Man I loved. Thieves in the Temple I loved, When Doves Cry, and it was just like I didn't, for some reason, and I was really into music, for some reason I didn't connect the dots and realize they were from the same guy. And I was reading like music magazines all the time, and for some reason it took me a long time to kind of put it all together. And when I did, somebody said, oh, yeah, like basically like, oh, so you're finally a Prince fan now. You get it. Like, and
initiation.
Appreciation. And on that tape was Scarlet Pussy was on that tape as well as Erotic City. So I thought Erotic City and Scarlet Pussy were like around the same time. So when I finally got into getting the 12 inches and realized where it sat, like done the research and where it sat, I was kind of like,
yeah, that's the fun of having to learn where the artist came from, because all of your hypotheses are totally changing all the time. And you go, oh, he did that before. He did that. That's so sophisticated.
Yeah.
And that changes everything. I have to rethink now.
And it's credited to Camille, not Prince, and then realizing the whole thing with the Black Album and having once Scarlet Pussy is a Peach and Black label with credited to Camille, and I Wish You Heaven with Take This Beat.
Oh my
Prince
God.
101.
Yeah.
Well, we've jumped Glam Slam, but let's go.
Go on, let's go back to Glam Slam.
Should we go to Glam Slam?
Let's go Glam Slam. Thank you, ma'am.
I mean,
we always end up singing on these podcast shows, man.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I love Glam Slam, but I can see why it didn't set the charts alight. It's weird. Glam Slam, like as a phrase, it was used by journalists, and it was sort of they used it in all sorts of headlines. Glam Slam, and they riffed off it for ages. It had a kind of cultural effect.
Yeah,
it didn't do that much in the charts, but I really enjoyed the 12-inch. Was it Shep Pettibone?
I was listening to Shep Pettibone remixes at the time because he was a big, like a lot of Madonna's remixes was Shep Pettibone. So I was listening to his remixes. So there's like, I was floored by how many crossovers there were with remixers. It's like they were both early adopters with William Orbit remixes as well. Like at the end of the 80s, start of the 90s. So it was kind of...
Well, this is one of the first times Prince brings in people from outside the fold to remix. I mean, he did it on Hot Thing, but that was Hot Thing was already only a B-side. This is where he actually gets someone to remix the A-side for the first time.
Was it Junior Vasquez for Hot Thing?
I think it was, yeah.
And
like, the Hot Thing remixes are okay, but they're not major. I've always really liked the Glam Slam remix by Shep Pettibone.
Yeah.
But a part of me was always like, being such a purist, it was like, I don't even want other influences to come into Prince's circle. I don't even want House to impinge on Prince. But I think it's a really successful remix.
Mm. And both of you heard the album by the time you heard the Glam Slam single, the remix.
Oh, yeah, we digested the album by then.
Yeah. And so you were a fan of the album by the time that second single comes along.
Yeah, it took me about a week of very heavy rotation until Lovesexy really opened up for me. But yeah, absolutely, I was By the time Glam Slam's out there, Lovesexy is all I'm talking about, thinking about, and dreaming about now. Yeah,
I really love the video.
Oh yeah, I don't think I saw that video until like the late 90s, early 2000s, actually, because there was not something that was readily available, and it was just, there was so much stuff I had to catch up on that it took me those 10 years to catch up on the previous 10 years while still absorbing the 10 years of releases that there was, because it wasn't like he was quiet in the 90s. It's like I was trying to keep up with everything he was coming up with in the 90s while still learning everything that was coming back. And Glam Slam Remix is a weird one for me because it's sandwiched between two absolutely epic 12 inches. Like I Wish You Heaven and Alphabet Street are epic 12 inches, like classics. Glam Slam is kind of falls between that wayside where I'd heard Escape on the B-sides, the hits of B-sides, before I'd heard it as the B-side to the 12-inch. So it just became a bit piecemeal, and it's sort of it's the smallest of the three, yeah. But I always really liked Escape just because it kind of sounds like Prince doing his own very, very warped, abstracted version of sort of garage rock in a Prince way. You know, that bass line is kind of like a weird surfing bass line. Like that's the Beach Boys, right? Yeah.
That's like surf pop. But everything else about that song isn't, because it's just like in a bizarre scaffolding of Prince's sort of current soundscape. And it's nothing. It's just him just working out and doing gymnastics, and I love it.
Yeah. Although a great intro, the snare drum pound on the 2-hand floor. Yeah. You know, the fact that goes from Rebirth of the Flesh into the Lovesexy live shows and then into the Escape.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of sort of Prince leftovers cooked up into something that no one else could do. It's not like if Escape didn't exist, we wouldn't know that we missed it. But it's it's just a fascinating piece of brilliant nothing. I really like it.
Okay, so is everybody happy to go on to I Wish You Heaven?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so again, Lee, you and me, I think we're going to have to settle back and listen to the reaction of those that know, because when this comes out, I mean, I was floored years after the fact. Years after the fact, I listened to this and was just completely floored by this. And I'd already watched Lovesexy as well, so that Take This Beat stuff was just amazing to me. So you guys, when you first hear this 12-inch, like Freedom, I can see you even smiling, so I'm going to say Freedom go first, because you would just have this smile.
I wore the 12-inch out. That and the B-side as well.
Yeah.
I wore it out. I couldn't get enough of
it. Wore it out.
Yeah. Those grooves were flat.
Yeah, and I loved the video as well, directed by John Baptiste Mondino.
Yeah.
Who did the video for Jill Jones.
Yeah.
And some Madonna stuff as well, I believe.
Nana Cherry, Man-Child.
Yeah. Great video. I love the video. I just love the song. Yeah.
And the cover of the album.
Yeah. The whole package. Yeah.
I couldn't believe that 12-inch. I could not believe it. Because I Wish You Heaven is a really lovely song. But and it's just one of those perfect little songs that was just, I'm thinking of the apple in the video, but it was like plucked out of the ether, right? It was like, it's just such a simple tune. It feels like it always existed. But I mean, the production on the song is amazing anyway, but the actual DNA of the song as it appears on the album is so simple and perfect. It feels like it was just there waiting to fall to the right person. And another song that always strikes me like that is Love Thy Will Be Done. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
And but there are some songs that seem to write themselves, like Every Day Is Like Sunday by Morrissey just seemed to write itself.
Yeah. And
I've always thought of I Wish You Heaven like that. But then we just got given this unbelievable, like 11-minute slice or whatever it is of just like where the song is just relegated to become a nice little run-up to this unbelievable adventure. I can't believe what he did with that 12-inch. It's one of like his all-time greats. That the A-side is unbelievable.
It's that synth part, that da, 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 da. It's like I could groove on that for ages.
Yeah, and I mean he grooved on it. He did groove on it for ages in concert, but when it came out, part 1, 2, 3, I was the same as you, Freedom. I just played that thing over and over. I used to turn all the lights off as like a 14-year-old kid. I turned all the lights off and just groove to that song because that was just like that was just like church. That song, that 12-inch was like flickery voodoo church. I love it.
Well, I mean, it is straight gospel. You know, that kind of heaven, yeah.
And then, you know, the guitar solo, Say Hello to My Little Friend, the Blue Angel. And then, you know, no one plays guitar solos like that, like the one in Bat Dance. Those are just ultimate, like, Prince tone. They're so, like, they are so crunchy, those solos. And then you'd go, and then, so you'd get that middle section. And then the third section, Take This Beat, was just like pretty much the James Brownsiest thing he ever did, I think.
Which again, with that parts 1, 2, and 3, like he's doing that, like he's continuing that homage thing of like separating out like this one big thing, saying, you know, they're not like it's not 3 different remixes. They're just like cuts from this same epic jam, and this is how it's meant to be played. Except
he put them all on one slice on one side, so like you were just guided through it from like sweetness and light. And then suddenly you're into this new world of just testifying. And then it started off with I Wish You Heaven. And then by the end of it, he's just like doing you from behind, man. I mean, it's like who does that in 10 minutes? Prince Rogers Nelson and no one else. It's unbelievable. It's sweetness and light. It's funky religion. And then it's just sex in a hedge, man.
It goes into, you know, like it's, like, yeah, it's beautiful. It's pretty pop. Mavis Staples and Bob George in the same track. You know,
like that. Honestly, that one, I would just play that over and over and over, and I would just feel power from it, total power.
I think it's also interesting that although it's parts 1, 2, and 3 on the CD, it's not tracked. On the CDs, there's just 2 tracks. There's I Wish You Heaven parts 1, 2, and 3 as one track. You know, as one big 10-minute thing, and then you've got Scarlet Pussy as just a separate thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's 2. We're talking about two tracks, yeah. The A side and the B side. That's right. But it was also like it to me. It's just like how Prince can just go at any time if I feel like it. A song can morph into a whole new concept. A song can become a mini album if I want.
Yeah,
and that's what
he did that a lot.
He did that a lot, and he just picks up I Wish You Heaven and just goes, let's play with this now. It's like the song, you know, the song is now just an excuse to go somewhere.
Yeah. I think one day somebody has to draw the Prince music tree, because his songs quite clearly stem, like, he has these kind of musical veins from which you can tell one song come out of playing something else live, and then there's these other things that are just seeds, a new branch, like Lovesexy, a new branch, but then, you know, Around the World in a Day, a new branch. But you can see these, like the songs, some of them, like the early mix of Daddy Pop, you know, has got Lay Down Your Funky Weapon in it. So it's kind of like you can see how Daddy Pop came out of rehearsing New Power Generation. And you can see how, you know, 9 to 5 People, you can see how Rebirth of the Flesh becomes Glam, Slam, Escape. But so I'd love one day to see that tree in its kind of all its glory.
Homework.
Yeah, exactly. So like Scarlet Pussy and 1 + 1 + 1 is 3 are both clearly on the Erotic City tree, you know. So it's. I
never think of Scarlet Pussy as particularly related to Erotic City. I know you said that you linked them, but I don't hear that so much.
It's the pitch shift. It's the minimalist groove, pitch shift vocals, some pitch shift guitars that I really, to me, tonally, like the kind of, teamed with content. It's like he's found quite clearly a sexy sound. So if I want to work sexy, this is a good sonic field to be in, as opposed to, say, kind of groove map.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think Erotic City is such a slam. It's unrelenting. Scarlet Pussy is like a really kind of prowling thing, and I'm not just getting that from the cats and the dogs, but it is kind of like Scarlet Pussy is really it's a walk through the red light district for me.
Which would, to be quite honest, it'd be a really good beat. If Scarlet Pussy was a A-side, Rock Hard in a Funky Place would be a good B-side.
Absolutely. There you go. They've both got that sleaziness to them. I think Erotic City, they're super sleazy, but they're super sexy.
I'm happy to move that to another branch.
What can I say, Shokes? I like to get in your head, man.
Exactly. No, this is a great...
This is definitely the 18 and over version.
So Freedom. So when you flip the 12-inch, this is still the 18 and up. So when you flip the 12-inch, I didn't mean it like that. And you heard Scarlet Pussy for the first time. Like, what did you think of that? Because you're still like a teenager at this point, right?
No, I used to listen to George Clinton a lot, and it reminded me a lot of George Clinton in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very Clinton-esque, and I like that kind of deep bass to it, deep groove. It's just a good song.
I get
funk song.
Yeah, and it's because a lot of those like funkadelic songs, they use the pitch shift, and as well, they use the tape print on backing vocals to create characters as well. It's you might have moved it back on. Sorry, Andy. It might have been moved back onto the Erotic City tree because Erotic City is inspired by funkadelic. So
okay. Oh, okay.
I think this might have been, moved.
This is going to be debated for a while now.
I think the funkadelic tree is a big tree. I mean, but I think definitely what Scarlet Pussy has is the obsession with cats and dogs, which is very George.
Yes.
And la 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 he as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Pussy Control.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it just occupies a different soundscape for me. But like Scarlet Pussy. I'm just trying to think.
So now we've got Andy singing now.
It doesn't take that much, Lee. It really doesn't. It's what else it's got that's very George in it is that spoken introduction.
The storytelling, and the kind of just once upon a time.
Yeah, once upon a time. That you could imagine George doing that. He'd do it differently. He'd do it more languid. But it's very George to tell this little nursery rhyme story.
Do you know the weirdest thing is that now saying that puts it on the same tree as the ladder.
Yeah. I've always thought that.
Once upon a time.
Yeah, in the land of sin and plenty.
We're going to have all these Prince fans drawing trees now.
Why not?
They're good trees to draw. There's always crossover and playfulness. And again, like Frank Zappa would always, he talked about his whole oeuvre as, I think, art stroke object complex or something. I forget now. But he was always about cross-referencing his work. And the Beatles did it. If you look at Glass Onion, cross-referencing different songs. I told you about Strawberry Fields. The Walrus was cool. And Prince picked up from that massively, and he would sew allusions to previous songs or little phrases that recur in other songs, so that if you got into it with the right ears, the deeper you go, the more connections you hear.
Loud music from a band plays a song called Soul Psychedelicide.
Absolutely. So you can go secular. You can go religious with the ladder. Once upon a time in the land of sin and plenty, and then you can go secular with Once Upon a Time in the Land of Fear, and you know that Prince. There's no way Prince wasn't thinking of that when he did it.
One of the raps on the Symbol album is all the tracks.
Yeah, I love that.
It's in the tracks.
And then the same with the rap in Push, where he goes through the track listing of Diamonds and Pearls.
Mm-hmm.
Back when Horny Pony was still on the album.
Yeah, and it's listed because it's like Horny Pony, and then obviously it wasn't on the album.
So like he was always brilliant at stitching together to make a big crossword for the listeners. And like, you know, the more you know it, the more you go.
Even with the MPG operator, you know, other samples may include Housequake, blah blah blah. You know, so always clever.
And the end of musicology, like. Okay, so.
Cool.
I think we're pretty universally on the page that the I Wish You Heaven single is it's up there with one of his best.
It's a monster.
It's a monster. It's an achievement. You know, to have something that great be a side note in your career is right. That says something. That would be the crowning achievement of some people's career, and with Prince, it's kind of like a little known side note.
Well, I've always said that like there are whole unreleased tracks from the 80s that are better than unreleased tracks from the 80s, bootleg tracks that are better than other people's entire careers, in my view.
Well, there was something that was that reminds me of something. Lovesexy. I think when I finally heard In All My Dreams, the first thing I thought of was like, wow, he took that idea and made Lovesexy. Like that kind of, to me, that they're really, I find them similar tracks. You know, they're just like these kind of avant-garde grooves that then just suddenly at the middle of it, you know, like, oh, little whittle, you got me tripping all over the floor. It's very similar to Lisa, you take the side of the brush and I'll take the train.
Yeah,
the very speed vocal going in and out.
It is one of my favourite type of Prince tracks where the pretext for the song or the point of you get a great song and then it just becomes a pretext to just play. And another example of that is I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man, because if it just stopped at the guitar solo and did another chorus, you'd be fine with it because it's an absolutely magnificent song. But no, he just goes on a journey with it and then comes back and you're just like, what?
And the way he stretched that out live was just crazy. So, speaking of stretching those grooves out live, the Lovesexy tour, I believe you both went, right?
My memory is so foggy. My memory, but I went, yes.
Yeah.
If you can remember the Lovesexy tour, you weren't really there.
Was it music? Was it a trip? Who can tell?
Yeah, I went for 3 nights.
Oh man!
I think I got my tickets through Controversy at the time. They were doing
Fan magazine, yeah.
Priority tickets, the fan magazine, yeah. And
so you went 3 nights at Wembley, huh?
3 nights at Wembley, yeah.
Oh, please tell us.
From what I can remember, it was amazing. It was amazing. It's like in 2 parts. First part was like the dark side, and the second part was like the spiritual side. And the pivotal point was Anesthesia. And you had the Thunderbirds sort of like going around, and Cat and Sheila on top dancing on it. Oh yeah.
Well, I had tickets for the Sign of the Times concert that famously got cancelled the year before, and I bet you did too, Freedom.
I did, yeah, but it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. So my first gig was Lovesexy. I only went 1 night, and after that tour, I used to go to like 5 nights on the trot after that. But for Lovesexy, we didn't have great seats, but they were made a lot better by the fact that he was playing in the round. I remember really distinctly that we were very near the speaker that they used for the siren effect on Bob George in the first half, because that really blasted at me. So I can remember that, like, you know, there were speakers all over the place because it's a concert, but some of these sound effects were very direction orientated. And then, I mean, oh my goodness, if you've seen Lovesexy, I'm not trying to pull rank, I'm really not, guys. But
no, just it is what it is.
That's fine.
It was a great thing to see. I have I just have memories of colour and sound, and it was a really transcendent gig, as you've probably, you know, picked up from watching the Lovesexy release and everything. But I remember that on my night he did bring out Mavis and George as well in the second half. And I was already quite a big Parliament Funkadelic fan, but I'm not sure I was putting it all together. I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing. And then I didn't really know Mavis, but what I knew was that there was just like stuff going on that was just opening my mind up, opening. And it was very ecstatic, you know, without the use of margaritas or ecstasy.
It was the first, I'll have to say, it's the first time I kind of got a peek at Prince live, because somebody bought me the VHS for my birthday, because it was like the first birthday after I became, that I was like, I'm a Prince fan. So they got me, and my brother got me both parts on VHS. And I think weirdly enough, I watched part 2 first, like, which is actually how it's meant to go in the concert, because part 1 on the VHSs was the second half of the concert.
Yeah, they marketed the second part as the first part just for the casual fan, because that had all the hits on it.
Yeah. And so I got part 2 first and was like, oh, I'm seeing this in reverse order. And then when I watched it when I watched part 2 as well, I was like, well, actually, it really works like that. And then I subsequently find out that that's actually how you meant to watch it. And I was just like, I have to watch every tour. That's, I think, watching that VHS and there not being that much officially released live. I think there was the Purple Rain and the Sign of the Times movie. And at that point, it was like, you know, he'd already come around the Diamonds and Pearls tour. So there was a lot to go back and ingest. And it was just like, oh, it's so different live than it is on record, that this is worth.
I think what's great about that tour is it's like, Sign of the Times was clearly so majestic live. So the tour was so kind of everything in the right place. And again, it's got that encyclopedia. It's got a majesty about it, and that's why the critics love it, and they're right to love it.
Yeah.
It's got that solidity. You can see everything that's come before it and everything that Prince is doing with it. Lovesexy is just mental. Lovesexy is where, you know, Lovesexy is where all of that stuff, he's starting to like make it fall apart in an ecstatic way. And it's teetering on the brink. He looks really like a prophet. He's got his hair down to his arse, really. And he looks absolutely possessed in that performance.
And
there's so much going on stage. You couldn't focus on any one thing. It's just like, load of stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You're kind of watching one man just burn himself out gloriously, and it's like it falls apart in a brilliant way.
The transitions as well. Like, there were so many little musical parts that were part of medleys and stuff like that. Like, little bit of dance on during Sheila E's drum solo, and little bits of the glamorous life as they're walking around. There was so much of it that it really set me up well for when I looked back at all of these albums, because this is, you know, I got this at such an early part of the journey that actually when I started looking back and listening to albums, it was almost always like, oh my God, you know, like, and I saw Sign of the Times, the movie, before I listened to Sign of the Times, the album. So it's kind of interesting that actually Lovesexy Live, I was really disappointed with Sister on the album, because the version of Sister live that guitar and
Did you get over it? What do you think of the album version of Sister these days?
I like
prefer the live version.
It's fun. It's fun, and it's that kind of like it inherits that like kind of rockabilly space that Prince does and did really well in the early days. But it still doesn't give me the same. I still don't think of it as the definitive version.
Because he played it. Because he played it as kind of thrash punk almost on Lovesexy, right, live.
It's the way he sung it as well. Like, you know, like on the album, it's like, "No, sister never made love to anyone else but me." But you know, yeah, exactly. But the way he attacked, like I would say, the way he attacked it live is that was like the lyrics are actually, you know, like he's kind of being manipulated, and there's some kind of anger, and that he's like hard done by in the song, and actually. The way he delivers it on the album is just like kind of like, oh, this is a really outrageous tale, ha ha ha. Whereas in live, it's like part of that story arc of the concert of it's like part of his residual anger, and it's like it's such a amazing performance that like to me that's how the song is. It still is in my head.
Okay. I mean, I love the album version. I love both versions, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, like, I think he really started this on the Parade tour where, like, if you didn't know Automatic, if you watched the Parade tour, you might think that Automatic was just a riff that had been thrown into a concert for a minute, but no, it's a 9-minute track. And so that's why he started really sequencing songs live and just throwing away a verse or two to move on to the next thing, to move on to the next thing, to move on. And like Lovesexy is amazing because he, it's kind of his most successful absolute race through his back catalogue. It's like a race to get to where he wants to, which is Bob George, Crisis, Anesthesia, Catharsis, and then Reborn in the second half. But the way he stitched those songs together from his back catalogue in the first half of the Lovesexy concert,
a narrative, yeah,
it's an incredible piece of orchestration, really.
Oh, I think it's incredible, and that version of Anastasia is just otherworldly. The way he screams on it, like, is to this day. I've watched it a million times, and I get chills every time.
That's another thing about the whole Lovesexy live experience was how I've never been a religious person, but you could feel that everybody was included in Prince's version of religion back then in a way that wasn't true later down the line when it had become dogmatic and he was taking from scripture. But in Lovesexy, it was like, you could feel like, I'm not really religious, but I get what he's talking about because it's an open-ended creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it's the open comparison that a lot of people do with Prince's catalogue is obviously between Lovesexy and the Rainbow Children, and the Rainbow Children originally being released as a 1 MP3 start to finish journey, which I would admit that's the way it should be listened to, just like Lovesexy, and they are both reactions to, again, it's a reaction to what came before it, the kind of production in Rave Into the Joy Fantastic and what was to be high in MPG Music Club. You know, they were both, what gets me through both of them is they are both Prince inspired. Like, both Prince absolutely committed, not questioning, going forth. Now, Lovesexy I can go all in on.
Yeah.
Because I believe in the words as well as the music. Rainbow Children, I can go 75% in on because there's some of the stuff I can kind of go, oh yeah, but there's that 25% that is just I'm not down for. So it's kind of like Lovesexy is interesting like that, and it's something that's so joyous. I can go. It's religious, but I can go 100% into it, and there is not many things that you can say that like the atheists can really.
Lovesexy just feels like the most inclusive personal, revelatory invitation to just do your thing, and the Rainbow Children very much doesn't.
Yeah, it's kind of like Rainbow Children is like velvet rope religion, like it's religion with a VIP room, as opposed to, Lovesexy feeling like everybody, if you exist, you're included, and I think that is something. Not to say that I don't like the Rainbow Children, so I'm still 75% in on how amazing some of it is, but Lovesexy is just, I don't know, I mean, like, a song like Anastasia, like, when you're a kind of closeted 15-year-old and some of those opening lines, have you ever been someone to play with someone so much you'd take anyone, boy or girl? It's just like, someone said that.
I know, right?
Someone said that. Like, this guy, like, who's naked on the cover, who's just, like, who I always thought, even with those lyrics, I always thought of Prince as a straight guy, like heterosexual guy. Like, I never questioned that. It was just like this guy who, this ladies' man in beautiful, flawless makeup, lace, high heels, and like, if you look at the some of the Lovesexy work, I mean, he's got drag queen makeup.
Yeah, right. The concert program was amazing.
The concert program he's got, which is behind Lee now.
I was about to say.
Yeah, it's basically drag queen makeup, and he's singing lines like, "Have you ever wanted to play with someone so much you'll take anyone, boy or girl?" And I have to say, for me, as a closeted teenager growing up in a religious household, that was just it blew my mind.
That's it. It seemed like a license to be whoever you wanted to be. You could take a little bit of what you fancied from Prince, and he would just. It was an invitation to just not worry about that stuff, right?
And yeah, it was great, and it was not a sexual thing. It was about love.
Yeah,
so, it wasn't even a sexuality thing. It was just because it was about the closeness of anyone. And it was just there was plenty of bits and bobs that I saw that spoke to the sexuality of it, but this was something that was talking about the love of it, and it was just that's just crazy. That's the fact that he did that was just crazy, and what was arguably to that day his most religious album. Yeah.
And then you get going back to that musical portrait on the BBC from '89. There was a fan on there, if you remember, saying he just interviewed after the Lovesexy show, saying, "Well, you've got all these people in this arena, and they're all singing God is love, girls and boys love God above, and you would never do that. But with Prince, you do that at that point, and it's okay, and it just feels you're all vibing on something, even if you don't believe in God."
I'd sing that in church and roll my eyes, but if I sing that in church, I'd roll my eyes, but I'd sing that at a Prince concert, and I'm just because
it's rubbish, isn't it? It's Christian rock of the worst kind, except somehow it ain't. It's brilliant.
You know what it is because you can look at it from both sides. God is love, love is God. You can look at it from the point of view of somebody who's a believer who says God exists and he is love, therefore and therefore it's the same thing. Or you can look at it from the point of view of the atheist. It's love, God is just what they're using to the believers are using to explain love. So love, God, that's exactly what they're trying to get at.
It was just Prince translating a feeling into something that everybody could get behind and take their own meaning from. And there's a bit in the Lovesexy concerts where he's got, I think it's near the end of the concert, there's a flag on stage and it says "No War,"
Yeah.
And this is just a brilliant example of, if anybody else did that, you'd just go, "Oh God, it's Bono, isn't it?" And no war. It would feel so nothing. It would feel like end poverty now. Yeah, all right, Bono. But when Prince puts up a thing saying "no war" in that context, you just get the huge hippie playground that he was operating in, and it means just those simple words mean something totally different.
Yeah.
Coming from Prince at that time than they could have meant from anyone else.
Well, I mean, he was so committed to every note and so committed to every dance move and so committed to every stage presence that nothing seemed like empty tokenism.
Exactly. And so what I mean is the words themselves sound childish. Love is God, God is love, but nothing else about it is. And it was all about alchemy of turning those simple things into huge, powerful emotions.
I've always argued that being a Prince fan is a religion in itself. And experiences of tours and live performances, it is a religious experience.
I think the Bible's easier to study.
I think that's true. I mean, like, that's true of lots of bands. You could have right now someone's recording a Grateful Dead podcast, guarantee it. And there's other bands that I'm really into, but this is what big personalities and bodies of work inspire this kind of fandom. But with Prince, the religion was baked into the message as well as everything else, and I agree. Different levels. With Prince, he was always talking about the big subjects in life from the start of his career onwards.
But at the same time, he was singing Scarlet Pussy.
Of course. Well, but we said it before. He starts off with "I Wish You Heaven" Part 1, and look at the end of it.
Yeah. If you wanted to, we can slam all comers.
And then like Sister's Ugly, he eats pizza in the backyard. It's like, hold on a minute, weren't you talking about "I Wish You Heaven" a minute ago? And so Prince didn't need to. Prince never separated it. At his best, it was always. I'm going to give you everything on the plate, and you can make up your own ideas. Have your own mind about it.
Saturday night, Sunday morning, music.
All in
yeah. Saturday night at the party and Sunday morning at church. Like, it's all in the same groove.
He always stood on a lot of crossroads at his best, and he just transmitted all of those sort of big human impulses at the same time. And that's why
Yeah.
He was pretty good. He was definitely
all right. So for each of you, where do you find Lovesexy in the span of Prince's career? Like, where do you place it in the span of his career? As in,
sorry, I'll let Freedom go because I'm just yapping.
Yeah. Freedom, where do you put, like, when you place this, is say
what?
As in
marks out of 10, or
well, not so much marks out of 10, but as in, where does it stand in its importance for you, as opposed to say Purple Rain versus something like Purple and Gold? Like
gold.
We're on the spectrum between Purple Rain and Purple and Gold. Like, where does this stand for you? Is this more important? To me, this is more important to me than Purple Rain. So, where does it stand for you?
I don't think it's more important than Purple Rain. I think Purple Rain was like the peak, the pivotal point of his career. Lovesexy is kind of the last album of his incredible 80s run, I think. After that, he was setting trends up until that point. And after that, he was following. He weren't being as innovative as he was during the 80s up until Lovesexy. After that, he was just following trends, I think, in my opinion.
Do you think that starts with Batman? Or
starts with Batman, yeah. It starts with Batman onwards.
We're definitely on the same chapter, if not quite the same page. I mean, I agree. I think Lovesexy was his last truly, the real A-list, the real run, the last of the golden run. And I love Batman, I think it's underrated. I think it's aged brilliantly, but Batman is like the top album of the next tier for me. But Lovesexy is where the wave breaks. And that's what I mean about falling apart. I think the production is so abstractified. You get those long grooves where a million ideas are hurtling through. You get him absolutely burning out on stage That's what it looked like. A prophet burning out had to just disseminate this message. And that's where the wave breaks and he becomes something else afterwards. And then I fully believe that Lovesexy is his last crucially great album of an unbroken run from Dirty Mind to Lovesexy.
John Lee?
I'm on the same page as both of them, but I feel I need to go back and do more homework on this album. I think I need to listen to it more because it's one of the ones where I just listen. I don't appreciate it enough, I don't think, and I think I just listen more to the singles than the whole album. I think I need to listen to the whole album in one go more often.
Lee, I sometimes think we're slowly breaking you down from a 90s boy.
Yeah, I know. Chopin chisels away and you've come with a sledgehammer.
I do think we're correct to do that, but it's interesting to me that it feels like you're someone who actually suspects that that's where you're going. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I know. It's like I don't, but it's interesting how Prince fans define themselves and split themselves into 80s and 90s. It's, you know, it's always been that way of people say, oh, I'm a Prince fan, but sometimes they break it down to, oh, I'm an 80s Prince fan, I'm a 90s Prince fan. But yeah, I'm definitely being converted.
Oh, I think you can be, say, like an 80s Prince fan or an 80s Prince fan and still love the other decade as well. I think part of it is about personally when you become a fan. So those first albums that convert you are kind of more important because you have the memory of discovering them as they come out. Like, this is why I kind of like turn to you guys in terms of how the reception is, because I'm looking back at them rather than discovering, you know, like, because Gold Experience, I remember like listening to all the bootlegs first, and like I you know, like I waited outside Our Price on the morning before, you know, like the doors opened, you know, before getting the CD. You know, I remember those albums. I remember Chaos and Disorder dropping with no warning, but like Lovesexy is something that people were telling me was great and were pointing to before I went and discovered it. Lovesexy is kind of interesting. I agree with you in the sense that it is the break of a wave. I think it's the last album where he tries to find out who he is. After that, he knows who he is.
That's a good way of putting it.
I think, which is because Parade is searching, you know, like, so he's going 100% in that direction. Lovesexy, he's going 100% in that direction. Around the World in a Day, he's gone 100% in that direction. I think after Lovesexy, he knows how to take all the elements and why those things sound quite consistent. I would say consistent rather than samey, because he knows from then on, he knows where he wants to use the jazz. I think he takes all of those elements and for the next decade uses them when and where. They're no longer he's no longer going, Miles Davis is a new thing, you know, like.
I think where Prince carried on doing amazing stuff was on the stage, and I underrated that somewhat.
Yeah.
You know, going back and watching a heck of a lot of footage in the last few years and reevaluating some of the concerts that I was less interested in attending, so many gigs, but seeing what he did on stage, that's where he kept his freshest, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I constantly go back and reevaluate post Lovesexy Prince, post 80s Prince.
Yeah.
But I still, and I find lots to love in there, but I don't find a crucial, I don't find like a vitalness to his work that I find from the 80s. And like, you know, big subject. I don't want to, I'm not going to...
Save it for the next one.
yeah. I'm not sitting here dissing Prince for the heck of it at all, but...
it's not a diss. It's not a diss because you're not saying you're comparing it to like... iconic.
I think that truly great artists often have a run where they're so hot and the best of them, very, very few artists get a run as good as Prince got in the 80s. It's very rare. It's extremely rare. And like, if he'd done nothing ever since, it would still be amazing. But it's so hard to sustain that sort of work for so long. And I think, I feel like that's where he burnt his brightest, and where it all makes sense to me, where like really every track in the 80s is kind of a story to me that makes sense. And then I don't hear anything in those songs that jars or bumps me, or it doesn't feel like just songs. It feels like a tapestry of excellence.
It's kind of interesting because, like, I guess because I didn't listen to it as it came out, sometimes there were things like, and maybe because I'd heard the live version first and kind of was digging that. And like, Housequake is definitely one of those things where it took me a while to appreciate the studio version, because the live version is so good from that Sign of the Times movie. It is so good. It
is, but the studio version is so rarefied. The studio version is so controlled, and that's one of his deepest cuts ever. The studio version of Housequake for me.
Yeah, I know this part of it was the one that made me start to appreciate the kind of the tone, like the tonality of it.
You will listen to 80s Prince.
Right, I've done the same thing with the Symbol album to him. It's fine.
I just think he was operating at a different level for a number of years, and that's and I can't. Repeated listens don't ever erode from that opinion for me. Although I find more to admire in other eras than I originally thought quite often. But nothing like, if you wiped out all of Prince's post-80s stuff, I'd still have the jams I needed.
Okay.
I judge Prince very harshly because he gave me what I would consider like hermetically sealed perfection for so long. It's pretty, it's interesting that I know there's a lot of crossover with when you got into Prince, when somebody gets into an artist.
Yeah,
that can often be an era that they absolutely love. But he didn't really pick up new critical acclaim from new critics coming through. Beyond the 80s. I mean,
not the musicology.
Okay, but there was lots of respect and there was lots of love, but he wasn't like considered a new wave of critics who were only encountering him in the 90s and beyond. That wasn't where the story of music was at. He wasn't.
No, because I'm very aware that like some of the parts where I really my favorite, it's not even that it's not his best reviews, that there's open derision to some of the stuff that he's doing. And I understand in like, if I'm talking about Prince in the world in respect to his importance and the work that's important to the history of music, obviously Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, but if I'm talking about from my point of view of what I connect with, what means the most to me and what I emotionally get the most out of, then it's from Lovesexy onwards.
No, I get that, of course. But again, I wouldn't disparage, no man should asunder the joy that another man's found, right?
Yeah.
I really like that. But this is the he constantly fascinates me enough to go back and listen to the stuff that I don't consider his best work. I still go back and reevaluate all the time. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Chopin. I just don't connect with those bits as intensely by a long way.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I kind of wouldn't expect you to, because it's almost like I hadn't seen all the tricks up his sleeve. Like, say, like 90s is like kind of like where he's kind of worked out all of the tricks that he's got to play. Well, I'm hearing them first time. Diamonds and Pearls, Symbol. So when I'm going back, I'm going, oh, that's where that comes from. Whereas If you're listening, you're hearing it as and when track.
It's almost like falling in love with the cover version first.
Yes.
And I get that. It was hard the other way around. Hey, Freedom. It was hard, but it's funny because I do think in his last years he was starting to really find new ways into aging his music more gracefully and more honestly and authentically, and that's why I think Artificial Age was fantastic. There was loads of stuff from his last few albums that really, really surprised the hell out of me, actually.
So, as much as we could talk about this for another 5 hours, probably.
About the length of the lockdown.
Exactly. And all the places that will take you, I don't think you can talk. I think what this has proved is you can't talk about one album in isolation. There's a vein of creativity that runs through Prince's work, which is why I think we're all so interested in the full journey, even if it's in places where we're actually, it's not really something we're feeling. It's just, you have to know every fruit on the tree.
Thank you, Ray and Andy, for joining us. It's been educational. I'm going to go and listen to Alphabet Street now, and
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chopin, Andy. I like to shout out to the Peach and Black people.
Yeah.
All the other podcasters, Nightchild, Donna Nissy, Michael Dean, Casey Rain.
Yep.
All of them.
Violet Reality, Prince Podcast, Muse to the Pharaoh, Peach and Black. I think I've got everyone.
The list goes on and on and on.
Bunkerberry, I think that's it.
Just prove how much you can talk about Prince.
Yeah, no, it's like 1 million podcasts now.
Prince said it himself, man. It ain't over.
Yeah.